So this is an extension of some of the work that David has already done. And it's a metadata model, data model for bibliographical metadata dictionaries. Something boring, not history, not literature, dictionaries. But I think some of the modeling issues that we're going to discuss in this presentation, as well as the implementation that we have made with David, are quite generic for other cases as well. So what was the motivation behind this? David has already mentioned the LexBib knowledge graph and catalog of lexicography and dictionary research. This already includes, as he said, bibliographical items, publications such as articles, handbooks, manuals, meta-lexicographic works, works that speak about dictionaries, and events, conferences, workshops, persons like authors and organizations involved in lexicography. The next step is to include dictionaries, the object of the study itself. Okay, dictionaries. We want to have bibliographical data for dictionaries, and we don't want to start from the beginning. There are already out there catalogs that have dictionaries in them. So we want to import them. We talk about linked data, so we want to link them to the data records that already exist in these catalogs, not only to the, for instance, dictionaries that are described in different catalogs, the same dictionary, but also to dictionaries that may be related to them, either articles or dictionaries that one of them is related to another one in some way, another publication, for instance. And we want to be able to export the items from this catalog into other catalogs. So in order to describe them, we had first to look at the catalogs that contain dictionaries. And we saw two trends to dictionaries, two different, not exactly different, but two types of catalogs that have dictionaries in them. One of them are the classical library catalogs or catalogs with bibliographical data, such as from the national libraries, WorldCat.org, or even Globalog, which is a website for languages, but also has for each language reference material, books about the language, grammars, dictionaries, articles that speak about the language, the history, etc. In these catalogs, we see that the dictionaries are represented as bibliographical items, printed books, CD-ROMs, etc. Of course, they have digital resources. And their main users, at least in the beginning, used to be human users that wanted to consult this reference material and cite the dictionaries. So the emphasis of their data is on publication data. I'm not saying this is the only metadata they have, but this is the emphasis there. On the other hand, there's also another community that of language resources, lexical resources, and data sets, which come mainly from digital humanities, language technology, etc. Communities. And there, the lexica are represented as digital resources. You have catalogs of computational lexica, machine-readable dictionaries, ontologies, term lists, or application-oriented lexica such as sentiment lexica, polarity lexica, etc. There's a number of repositories and platforms which have quite a rich list of such resources, like the Clarin Virtual Language Observatory, which harvests the metadata from all the Clarin centers. European Language Grid is dedicated to language technology, but also includes lexical resources or even the Google dataset. I mean, they say datasets, and yes, they have lexical datasets as well there. In these catalogs, users are mostly interested in finding and using the dictionaries, not just, but they want to use them, integrate them in their research workflows and applications. So here, the metadata is emphasized is mostly on the content description and how to automatically, as far as possible, access the data. So we have two different ways of describing dictionaries, complementary, let's say, and we wanted to have for our catalog a common model, trying to reconcile these two trends. For this common data model, there are some requirements. Obviously, we want to support fair data principles. I think most of us, well, all of us know that this means that data have to be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable based on specific principles that can be, that they have to comply with. They need to be interpretable both by humans and machines. We're not only talking about machine-readable data, fair principles talk about machine actionable data. As far as possible, allow the machine, the operator, to work on the metadata itself. We want them to be community-driven and community-supporting, otherwise they will not be adopted. If you don't speak the language, the vocabulary that each community speaks, they will not use it. And of course, we want it to be interoperable with other data models and data in catalogs. In order to link them, the data, we need to link the data models. And from the bibliographical world, we looked at, obviously, FRBR model, BIPO and DC ontologies that are used for describing dictionaries. And from the resources world, we looked at MetaShare, which is used already in these catalogs that I mentioned, and DCAT, which is the model mostly used, the most popular one for data sets, obviously with schema.org, but there's also an alignment between DCAT and schema.org right now. I'm not going to take too much time to talk about the FRBR model. This was discussed yesterday. There are 4 core classes: work, the abstract notion, expression, manifestation, and item, which is a book on a shelf or a copy of a file on a PC. On the other hand, in MetaShare, we recognize 2 main core classes, that of the language resource, the resource itself, with subclasses from which our interest for this project is the lexical conceptual resource. That is any data set organized on the basis of lexical items, terms, concepts, together with the supplementary material, be it grammatical information, glosses, senses, syntactic information. And the second class is that of data distribution. There's an error in this image. The dataset distribution should be linked to the 3 subclasses: lexical conceptual resource, corpus, and language descriptions, which are actually data resources. The distribution comes from the DCAT vocabulary, and it's any distributable form of the resource. It can be a CSV file, it can be a database file, it can be a TXT or a PDF. So for LexMeta, we decided that we want to use the MetaShare core classes, first of all, lexical conceptual resource and dataset distribution. And we wanted to align them to the FRBR class so that we can actually have a common model between them to map them. We have mapped the lexical conceptual resource to expression, to editions, let's say. We think that that's where the 2 concepts are similar, and the dataset distribution to the manifestation class. In MetaShare, there's no class equivalent to item, but we don't need it for our own purposes. We're not going to have a library catalog where the items are linked. We just have a catalog of the books. We don't care about the exemplars, the physical exemplars themselves. On the other hand, we would like to have a class for work, which doesn't exist in MetaShare. So we have introduced a new class, the LCR series. This is again adopted from the DCAT vocabulary, but this is from a working version of the DCAT. This is not yet the official one. This is version 3, which is currently under development. But it looks like this is going to be adopted, this specific concept series. And this we have mapped to work. What does it mean mapped? We have decided to use the property subclass of for this mapping, for the formal representation instead of equivalent class. We believe that they do not share exactly the same properties. This is why we decided to use the subclass property. For each of these core classes, an example of how this means, the Oxford English Dictionary. This is a lexicographical project with 2 editions in 1933 and 1989, with quite different contents between them and different structures. 1933 has its own publications, like a book that was published in 1933. The OED has different publications, again, as a book or as a CD-ROM. This is a very simplified example, okay? Things are a bit more complex than presented here. So the lexicographical project in our catalog will be represented as an LCR series, the editions as lexical conceptual resources, and the publications as datasets distributions. Since in the model we already have the property subclass, this means that we can infer from the ontology that the OED project is also an FRBR work. So for each of the classes, we're also looking at the properties that we want to assign to them. For the lexical conceptual resource, as we said, this is the equivalent, the subclass of expression. So there we have mostly the content description properties. Obviously also descriptive and identification properties like resource name, a description so that human readers can understand what this is about, classification information, which is also general for any bibliographical item, like keywords, language. Because we're dealing with a linguistic object, it's quite obvious that the properties that we have for language are quite rich and elaborate, not only the contents of the language, but also if it's a translation, the source and the target language. The meta-language, a dictionary, a bilingual dictionary, a monolingual dictionary that has definitions in another language. And then we have a lot of classifications that are specific to the lexicons, like lemma type, dictionary function type, and I will say a bit about it later. Obviously, relations and provenance information, relations to actors, the distributor, the provider of the resource, the creator, relations to documents, where it's cited, whether it has been reviewed by an article, and relations to other lexica, to other dictionaries, part of continuation, etc. Specific to the classification, David has already mentioned the LexVoc vocabulary that was originally designed to classify lexicographical articles. It was created based on various sources, glossaries, ontologies, for instance, the LexInfo ontology, which is used for grammatical information, but also from terms that were extracted from the articles in LexB. These have been organized as different classification types, like lemma. What is the headword of the dictionary? Is it a multi-word unit? Is it a term? Is it a lemma? The lexicographical process, the function of the dictionary, is it intended for translation? Is it a pedagogical dictionary? Is it a foreign language learners dictionary? Microstructure feature, what kind of information it includes? Does it have information about grammatical categories, grammatical gender, etc.? On the other hand, on the properties of the distribution, which is equivalent to the publication, as we said in FRBR, we have, again, we need to have also identification information like what the title is, what the identifier, the DOI or the ISBN, ISF identifiers are, information about the publication, the publisher, book edition pages, but also information on distribution. under what license is this resource coming from? I mean, especially for digital resources, this is very crucial. Is it for free, or is it available for a specific amount of money? How can it be accessed? Is it available as a lexicon through an interface, through a Spark query, through an API? If it's a downloadable file, where can I download it from? And technical metadata, which are very crucial, especially for NLP applications, like the format. If I have a specific format, a PDF, I can open it with a PDF file, or if it's a TXT, I can process it in a specific way. If it's an RDF file, I can use it with a Spark query. And again, of course, we have relations with actors, and depending on the role, we have different relations for the distribution. Distributions are very important because we have them, okay, with actors and documents, citation, reviews, both at the level of the resource, but also at the level of distribution, so that we can refer to them. We have a rather rich set of relations between lexica, newer version, older versions, parts, continuation of a previous dictionary related with. It has been using the same theoretical model, etc. And also with other language resources. For instance, this resource is accessible with this tool, or it can be visualized with this tool. Then the tool has its own metadata record, okay, and can be described with MetaShare, not with LexMeta, obviously. This is very important because through that we can actually map the landscape of lexicography and metalexicography. Dictionaries together with all the metalexicographical works and actors that surround that dictionary. We don't have any properties for the series, for the FRBR work, because this was introduced very lately, and we haven't had the time to discuss and elaborate the set of properties that we would have for them. One thing I forgot to say, of course, obviously what I'm showing here are just a subset of the properties. There are many more that we can use. Okay, and implementation-wise, not only did we want to have the two models, we also decided to implement it in using different linked data technologies. One of them is obviously Wikibase, and David has already explained a lot about it. Wikibase, because we're extending the existing LexMeta Wikibase, and all the advantages that we have with it have been already mentioned before, so I'm not going to repeat them. Just to say that in the slides you have at the end a link to the implementation of the LexMeta model in the Wikibase. I don't want to say format, in the Wikibase software. Yeah. Is that the proper word? Yeah. We have also implemented it as an RDF-OL. Why? Because LexMeta is based on MetaShare, which was also implemented in OL, and this gives us the opportunity to have to address also the language technology and digital humanities communities that are already using RDF-OL. These are also technologies that are very popular with the linked data and semantic web communities. And by having this model, it allows us to publish both the model and the data, the catalog records of the dictionaries in common RDF serializations like RDF XML, Turtle, and JSON LD and JSON. There are also software tools out there that allow us to automatically generate the documentation of the model through the TTL file. And again, this is the link where you can find the old implementation of LexMeta. We also have implemented in SCORS the controlled vocabularies, the LexVoc that was mentioned before by David and me, but also the meta-share controlled vocabularies, the properties that have controlled have as a value a controlled vocabulary. SCORS is the obvious choice, let's say, for controlled vocabularies. It allows us to represent semantic relations, and there are free software tools that can be used for editing them, like VocBands, but also for publishing them, like Cosmos, which was mentioned in the first presentation today from the University of Helsinki. It also has an API that can be used for querying SCORS vocabularies, and that allows them to have, let's say, a life of their own. They can be reused independently of LexMeta for other applications. So where do we stand right now? As we said, we have implemented the LexMeta model in Wikibase and O with controlled vocabularies and SCORS. Having the two implementations in parallel creates its own problems. So David has written a script for the automation of the export of the Wikibase into the RDF serialization so that we can have them synced all the time. And there's a link for this here. And I think we should also discuss, we're already discussing the other way around. If we want to make a change in the RDF serialization, how to automatically generate it also in the Wikidata. We're documenting the model. As I said, there's an automatic generation, but we want to enrich it and make it more user-friendly for human users. And we're looking at other catalogs metadata models like OBELEX-DICT and WorldCat and GlobalLogs so that we can see if there are any properties that we would like to enrich the model with. As a test, we're already importing entries from the above catalogs to find gaps, to find errors, anything that would that would lead us to review and improve the model. Next steps, of course, as I said, we're validating and improving the model based on tests that we're performing with catalogs, but we're also collecting feedback from various communities. Nexus Linguarum is a cost action for linguistic linked open data. This is where this work has started together with eLexis, as mentioned before by David, which is for the electronic lexicography, and that started the work on LexBib. And we're also discussing with the W3C community group linked data for language technology. We have some plans for the implementation. We want to enrich the RDF serialization, the RDF implementation with constraints for optionality and cardinality with Shackle specifications. And we're also thinking of implementing one more mapping, one more conversion into a CMDI profile. CMDI profiles are used in Clarin for metadata descriptions. They're XML based, and this is how we can link and export them to the VLO, to the Virtual Language Observatory. So that would allow us to address one more community out there. And of course, as David mentioned, we're also looking at the Wikidata alignment. This is the core team, so we'd like to thank our collaborators, Christiane Klaus and Katarina Girju. And of course, you can reach us for any, if you want to collaborate with us on this project. And I'm not going to try and pronounce them definitely, but we would like to thank you and ask for your questions and comments, and hope they have been correctly translated by Google.
They are. Thank you very much. Thank you, Penny. Thank you, lady. And time for questions.
Giovanni would like to ask something.
Sorry?
Giovanni.
No,
Giovanni.
he was only clapping.
Giovanni was only clapping. We thought also it is Giovanni. Okay, but Don't mind. Any other question?
My question would be, will it be on metadata on dictionaries, or did I get it that you also have the actual content of the dictionaries there, or no?
If we have the dictionaries, yes. I mean, through these two elements, download location and access location that I meant, you can also have access to the actual file.
Okay.
In fact, if it's directly accessible through a tool, that's where you use download location, and then you could do work on it, either metadata extraction or metadata extraction or anything else you
But
want
the
to do.
dictionary, but do you plan that dictionary entries will be a wiki-based, for example, entity or not? So let's say there's just an entry, or you're not planning it?
That would be a different project.
Okay.
This is now it is describing dictionaries. Now having a dictionary catalog, a model for a dictionary catalog, and the basic message here is that we have to distinguish between the distribution and the expression, no? Or the manifestation and the expression, or in LexMeta terms, the lexicoconceptual resource and its distribution, because it's not the same thing. We don't have to convince you of that. And it is the actual catalogs which exist now mix up both things, no? So they are very redundant. If the same dictionary has been reprinted 3 times, you have 3 entries in the catalog. Now, and that's we don't want to repeat that. Now this is why we model first and then populate.
And the second question is, you mentioned that you have some of your classification resources are both in the, let's say, Cosmos, for example, right, and the Wikibase. So you need to synchronize them automatically. And you have it one way, in the one way, and now we're working the other way. But primarily, what are you editing? So rather in the Wikibase or in the Cosmos? Where are you editing primarily?
Cosmos is not editing it for
Yes,
publishing.
yeah.
We have a Bookbench instance where we're playing around for editing the Scores vocabularies, and there's also the Wikidata or Wikibase editor, which is used for the vocabularies. At this point, I think we're sticking with Wikidata.
Yeah, if we change something in the model, we change it on the Wikibase, and then it is automatically changed on the other side.
Okay, and this synchronization, do you have it published somewhere, the scripts for the synchronization?
Yes, this is somehow hacky as well. I know that there are more people wanting to do something like that in the Wikibase community, and they are thinking about a more generic way of defining, because in Wikibase you have always these numbered properties, no? And you're of course able to say this is the same as that other property from this W3C vocabulary. But there's no generic way to press a button and have translated your data set to these other identifiers, no? But it is possible, and we're doing it in a bit hacky way, but we're doing it. There was the link in the slides. If not, I thought it was.
Thank you.
Checking if there is any other question. I know this is just in the chat. If not so, thank you all once again.
Thank you.
Thank you.